So I'm just going to throw to you, John, again, and I'm going to ask you, I know you've got a little presentation, what is a technologist? What does a technologist look like, and what drives technologists?
Good questions. And I'm going to ask a question. How many of you were at the 2008 conference in Alice Springs? Anybody? One? Okay. Yep. So nobody else heard this presentation or this theory, which actually came out of an experience where I discovered a new station manager, somebody who was actually ill-equipped really to come into community radio, should not have been selected, but the panel selected him into that role. He subsequently left under a cloud, sort of trying to indicate here that I was right, he was wrong. But he was offered as a marketing salesperson coming in to revitalise the station. He was offered the opportunity to go to Alice Springs and be part of the CBAA Conference, and you'd think as a new manager he'd go, right, let me go and engage with the sector, meet the team, learn from my peers. I looked at what he had been doing, and I was already seeing messages that were coming to me going, you're in trouble here. And it wasn't so much me in trouble because they weren't about to shoot me out, but he was already taking actions that I could see were going to cause problems with the technology team that I built up. Now, is there anybody here who is at a station who has three technologists in their station? Okay, so it's hardly anybody in the room. 4? 5? 6? Serious, Karen? How big's your team? 7. I'd built up, this was at a sub-metro in Sydney, I'd built up a team of 12. When we did an outside broadcast, there was enough people to cover absolutely everything. I had complete layoff on every eventuality. If something went wrong, we knew who could handle it. There were always 2 people who were able to handle anything. I was not the person who was going to be holding the station to ransom, because that's something that I think is just a vile situation. And it was all about the things that broadcast technologists do in order to keep things going. And yet I could see this person was about to go, there is a power base here, I cannot manage this power base, and I was getting the hint of that. And I sat down and thought, well, okay, I'm going to need to fight this in a public forum, so running a presentation at a national forum where he would have been surrounded by a whole lot of people going, yeah, Maizels is right. That seemed to be a politically astute thing to do. And I started to think about why it was that I had 12 people who would be turning up for gigs, or 6 or 7 would turn up every Saturday at this little sub-metro in Sydney. What was it? And that was actually a revelation. It was stuff that I'd never thought of before, and it explained a whole heap of my own behaviours as a technologist that I'd never been able to pin down before. So this was the presentation. This was sort of how to plant and grow technologists to your station, which is fundamentally what we're all here about. And the addition now, the 4 drivers that changed my life. So first thing, what's a technologist? Technologist is a really, really good generic term because it describes a number of things that we do. If you're an engineer, what you're doing basically is designing and managing things, but not necessarily doing stuff with your hands. There are plenty of people who come out with engineering degrees actually don't know how to use a soldering iron or a toolkit. If you're a technician, then you are the person who is going and fixing things, doing things with something, but not necessarily designing. And it was a bit of a revelation to me, since I've been doing all those jobs since I was a kid, to realise there are actually people who differentiate, like the plumber who is trained to make a pipe fitting but cannot tell you anything about metallurgy. It's a different set of skills. And then there are paratechnicals, and these are people who are sort of in the technology for the sake of the technology. You put all those together and we'll call them technologists. So whatever job you are doing, technologist. And the best technologists, the most powerful ones, are the people who quite comfortably will pick up a pencil, doodle, 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 good, now go and pick up a soldering iron, go and do it. And they're the people that you want to attract and grow. At the end of the day, technologists are important because broadcasting is a technology business. You cannot get around that. Content is king, but if the technology fails, you don't have anything going anywhere. Okay, now, so why do we need technologists? Well, of course, yeah, is that a silly question? But if you don't have the technologists there, then what happens? And the answer is things don't get built and they don't get fixed, and there's a whole lot of risk in your business because sooner or later something will fail. And by the way, this is not just us. I spent the last year looking after a television facility, and they've decided for funding reasons that they're not going to have anybody there now. I went back to sort out a problem on Thursday and discovered a massive number of things that had just in little ways gone wrong and would have headed them towards sure disaster because there was nobody just keeping an eye on the place. So a really important lesson. And one of the things that the commercial sector can do is when the shit hits the fan, and I use that term very advisedly, when things go wrong in the commercial world, you can buy your way out of trouble. We can't do that. Most stations will not have the money it would take to pick somebody up and fly them to some rural area to fix a problem with a transmitter. And we do hear about stations being off air for extended periods of time because there's just nobody there to keep the lights on. So, where do technologists come from? Well, now this is a challenge, and the answer is nowhere. The broadcast industry has actually shot itself in the foot. Nobody is doing training anywhere. You cannot go, thank you very much, Jürgen. There is nowhere you can go to learn to be the sort of technologist we've got. And by the way, we can't even issue qualifications to people who are in senior positions anymore because those qualifications don't exist and aren't on scope. So a person I know who is running 86 commercial radio stations cannot actually get a diploma because there's nobody who can issue it to him, even though clearly he has the qualification for the job. So we now have the situation where you can't find people, and there are often jobs sitting vacant for a very long time, which is a problem. So where do the technologists come from? And the answer is, one thing that is still apparent, anybody know how many community radio stations there are in this country? A guess. I know you know. How many? 440. It's a little bit more than that. 444. There are 444, but let's say over 400 stations where we could be growing the skills. We could actually be leading the process of growing technologists in the same way as we lead the process for growing on-air talent. We could be actually controlling and shaping the future of the industry. And I would encourage you to think in those terms as you engage with the technologist in your station. So, what can we do? Well, we could do nothing, and there's been a bit of that. We can sit around and whine a lot and say how bad things are, and there's been a bit of that, or we could be proactive. If you're going to pick one, I would say proactive is probably a good thing to do, but in order to be proactive, in order to get people into your station, you need to know what attracts them. Why would they come there and what would keep them there? So, let's think about it. What is it that drives a tech? What things are going to make somebody want to play in your sandbox? Somebody, drivers of a technologist. The toys you've got. Interesting, and I hear that a lot. And I'm going to say, not quite. Give me another one. Greg. Being trusted to do a job. Very important. We'll come back to that.
They want to be able to fix, repair, manufacture, or do things with their hands and their brain.
You I could kiss, and we'll come back to that in a second. I don't often get that answer. Very good. Cameron.
A workspace that is on par with any other workspace in your working environment.
In our dreams. But yes. Yes?
Like we're talking about attractors.
Yes? Yeah.
Cupboard beside the toilet is not an appropriate place for technologists to be working.
Okay. Anybody else? Yeah.
Valued and engaged.
Valued and engaged? Yeah. The challenge? Okay, these are all interesting things. And some of them are right on mark and some of them are skirting around. So what I'm going to do is to sort of distill this down into 4 words you can carry with you, which will explain absolutely everything. The funny thing is, if you look at what might be the attractors, you say, well, but I want to get these people into a station. What do I want to offer them? And the first things that come to mind with groups who aren't this one are often things that technologists don't care about. So I'll put them up. You might think power. You might think money. You might think booze. I did. I thought for a long time, all right, let's just have everybody in, we'll crack open a bottle of beer or something. Possibly even the obvious one. And it turns out that in all the experience I've had, none of these make a hoot of difference to almost all of the technical people that I've worked with. They are actually drivers of another type. These are things that will appeal and drive the sort of people, and with the greatest respect, the sort of people who might gravitate towards management positions or board positions, or particularly sales positions. With the greatest respect. I'm not saying everybody is tarred with these brushes, but we've all worked with people, indeed in the volunteer session yesterday, the discussion about what happens when you get the wrong sort of person, a power-hungry person who is there for the power trip. And, we can't pretend that doesn't happen. So, what actually does make techs tick? And this is probably the takeaway. So please listen carefully. I will say this only once. The psychology actually turns out not to be terribly complex. And when I analysed it, it came down to, I'd thought three things. I found a fourth later, and a reward structure. And if you get this right, you will find people who identify as technologists coming into your facility and staying and being in a position where you can manage them. Particularly if they understand this and you understand it, you're both on the same game. And I should say, people who are innately technologists, so this seems to be my DNA. I don't think it's naturally Emma's DNA, and so these might or might not apply to somebody like Emma or somebody like Bernadette, who came in and had a work pressure in order to do something. But in both cases, it was the interest that was there, and I would suggest that some or all of the following things are also sort of flowing very nicely in their DNA, and very much in Sharon. The short time that I've known her, I can see this. So, all right, what are technologists driven to do? The first thing that technologists are driven to do, and I've used this word a number of times and so have other people, is build things. Technologists are driven to build things. We want to create. We want to go and run the OB. We want to build the station. In the very early days, it was literally built. So my early days at 3PBS, I was building a studio where we were building the console as a team effort. Design, build, wire, everything. Not just the woodwork, the actual console, faders, everything, at a time when you could. I was in my early 20s when I did that. And I'd probably designed 7 or 8 consoles up to that time. Greg, you'd probably done, what, 2 or 3? Yeah. So by the way, bring out the kids. I'm happy to mentor anybody who is of a small age. If I could start that young, it doesn't mean to say that other people can't now. We need to be encouraging those people and not distrusting them on the basis that they might tinker the station into oblivion. My God, if you get a 13-year-old who wants to play in the sandbox, find somebody to mentor them and then let them show you how to use your iPhone. The next thing that happens is stuff breaks. So the next thing that technologists are driven to do is fix things. Now, all of these happen in some sort of balance. Not everybody, they're not equal in everybody. Some people are really driven to do one more than the others. I am incapable of walking past something that is broken. I will be late. Well, I was almost late for a concert last night. It cost me $20 in a cab because I used the time to fix a problem that I just couldn't let go. And fixing things is an extremely powerful one, extremely powerful. So if you find somebody who is driven to fix things, you grab onto them. Do not let them go, absolutely. So technologists, building and fixing. Now there are 2 more, and they distill down quite nicely, but rather interestingly. The third one is something that I realised was so much at the core of everything I was doing that I wasn't even really thinking about how powerful it was. But it goes to the core of a lot of conversations that you don't see happening inside somebody's head. So who was it who said about somebody who wouldn't do something? I remember I wrote it down before, and then it came up in the conversation earlier. I'll let you into a secret. I was a radio announcer when I was 18. I was down at 3CS for 7 months as an on-air announcer, not as a technician. There were 3 techs there. It was the chief, a technician, and a junior tech. I thought, gee, I'm the person who's been building consoles up to now. Maybe they'd want to talk to me. Nope. I was talent. I was not to be talked to. At the end of about 7 months, the boss called me into his office and said, John, either you're going to resign or I'm going to fire you. And what I had done in my 18-year-old completely lack of understanding was I had pissed off the chief engineer. I thought I was trying to engage. He didn't want an upstart, pimply 18-year-old announcer doing anything with the equipment that he had designed and built and nurtured. Now, I couldn't see the conversation at that time, and it sounds like a really simple, yeah, John, you were an idiot. You were an 18-year-old. You were doing things you shouldn't have been doing, and he got pissed off, and so the manager wanted to keep the chief engineer. But what's the conversation that was actually happening? Inside the chief engineer's head is, there is this actor that I can't control, and this and this and this might happen, and da-da-da, and then he's going to ask me, and the station manager, da-da-da-da, and I can't, no. And this is all about managing risk. I was creating a risk profile that this guy could not possibly handle or manage. You know, as an 18-year-old, I was pretty uncontrollable, and like all 18-year-olds, I thought I knew everything. And I still do, but not as an 18-year-old. And the truth was, I created a situation that was actually in my DNA. Managing risk is really important. It's what we do. When somebody comes up and says, can you go out and run an OB next week? A lot of techs will just go, no. And you go, where did that come from? And they'll just refuse to do stuff. And if you unpack the internal conversation, you can often find it's not because they're being bloody-minded or nasty or anything else, it's because they have a risk profile that you've just created. So, number 3 is manage risk. We are driven to manage risk. The final one is really, really important. And this explains why I've had so much trouble with boards over the years, and I don't know, my mother and a whole lot of other people. And I've also observed this in my colleagues around, including the director of technology of one of the TV stations I worked at, who I could see was having exactly the same problem with his board. So this really does permeate, and it's uphold the truth. And you go, uphold the truth, what's that about? Okay, let me ask you a question. It's broken, the transmitter's broken, when's it going to be fixed? Now, how can you answer a question like that? And the conversation that immediately goes through a technologist's head is, well, it'll be fixed when it's fixed. I know what I have to do, but I can't say, a particular time when it's going to be fixed. A salesman would say, will this do the job I want? Yeah, of course it will. Sign here, press hard, 3 copies. But technologists don't. Technologists are driven to uphold whatever the truth is that they see. So when you ask a technologist to do something that is outside the risk profile, is outside the understanding of how to build or fix, and is outside the field of I can control that, you get exactly the same as Robbie the Robot in Forbidden Planet, where it's and steam coming out. And uphold the truth is possibly one, it doesn't say technologists don't lie, but uphold the truth is possibly one of the most important. And it is why when you are a technologist in a board meeting and somebody says, so what's this going to cost, how long is it going to take? And everything slows down, because you can't answer that question just as simply as a marketing person might, because they know if they get it wrong, it's like, this football team will win. Oh no, they didn't, I got that wrong, but I'll be right next week. Technologists don't have that luxury. So, out of this, as a diagram, and I can now speed this up, a triangle. This is, you'll love this, Maslow's hierarchy of technology needs. And so it works much the same as the other one. We want to build, we want to fix, we want to manage risk, and we want to uphold the truth. Yes, I'll keep that up there while you take the photo. By the way, could somebody just sort of take a photo, make sure that we've got photos of the 4 of us here, because that never happens. And then Jürgen can tweet something else. Now, what's the recognition? The other thing that is really important is technologists need hugs. What do we need to drive us? All we need is hugs. We just want recognition. That was a great job. Wow, thank you for getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to fix the transmitter. Technologists just need to know that they're appreciated. It needs to be sincere, it needs to be appropriate, but it is the most powerful thing you can do. Way ahead of money or sex or booze or anything else. Although, I'm interested, yeah, I know. Cameron and I will be standing outside a little bit after going, yeah, money, yes, booze, yes, no. Okay. Now, this came up over breakfast, and truly this chart was already there. So here we go. So the recognition, the internal recognition, fine, but what about with the rest of the team? Well, technologists are driven to fix things, and they will turn up in the middle of the night, and they will fix stuff, and it'll be fixed before anybody knows it's even a problem, because we're looking at the rest and we're going, it's going to fail if I don't do something. So I'm on site at the transmitter, bar. And so if everything actually gets attended to, and if there's great preventative maintenance, and if all the right things happened, what happens? Nobody notices. So who gets thanked? And the answer is nobody gets thanked, because you assume that's part of the infrastructure. You've got to make sure that not only do your technologists get thanked, but everybody knows what it is that they have been doing under the covers when everybody else has been asleep. Now, here's an important takeaway also. We hear about education and training and the value of community radio, and in the volunteer session yesterday, sort of mentioned what happens when people come and you train them at your station and they go, thank you for the training, they piss off. And the correct answer is, wow, what a reputation to have. You want to be the source of those people. You want to be recognised as the organisation that is so good that everybody comes to you to get the training and then pisses off. A, guarantees you a constant inflow, probably guarantees you a bigger inflow that you're otherwise going to get, gives you a great reputation, gives you great opportunity to go and apply for grants because you have a process. The skills that are needed at the big end of town are the same skills that are needed in your station, just more of. And so everything that I am doing now in the commercial field and at a governance level and a whole lot of other stuff, things that I learned going through balance sheets and going through constitutions when I was in my early 20s and going for radio licenses, working with groups like PBS. So you should get the reputation for building those skills in your people. Help them. And here's a way you can help them. So now the ad. And I'm going to announce right now in this forum, you hear it before anybody else does, that next year's Technorama, the date has already been set. So Technorama is the organisation we've set up to provide education and facilities and training and community for the technologists who support this sector. And that means we need those people to engage with Technorama, or it will vanish. Only as good as the people who contribute. Next year's Technorama will be held in Campbelltown, same venue we held it this year. It will be held on the 16th, 17th and 18th of June next year, so you have 7 months to get the travel past your board or committee. And all the information you want is at technorama.org.au. So you can go there now and find out about it, and by the way, airfares are really cheap at the moment. So you want to put those in place. We will guarantee that it's going to be held. Everything is locked down. We'll tell you about the programming later, but you can do it right now. There you go.
Thanks, John. Thank you very much.
Big finish.